Welcome to our channel. In this video's understanding how to identify different meats from livestock is essential for chefs, home cooks, and food lovers alike. Each type of meat, whether it's beef, pork, lamb, goat, or others, has unique characteristics in color, texture, flavor, and fat distribution. By learning these distinctions, you can choose the right meat for your recipes, ensure proper cooking techniques, and even avoid food fraud. In this video, we'll break down how to tell each meat apart, both raw and cooked, so you can become more confident in the kitchen and make informed choices at the butcher or grocery store. Let's dive in. Identifying different types of livestock meats from one another is both a science and an art that combines sensory evaluation, anatomical knowledge, and culinary experience. The major categories of livestock meats include beef, from cattle, pork, from pigs, lamb and mutton, from sheep, goat, and less commonly, bison, venison, deer, and horse in some regions. Each meat type has distinct characteristics such as color, texture, fat distribution, bone structure, taste, and smell, all of which can help distinguish them in raw or cooked form. Starting with beef, which comes from cattle, this meat is typically a rich, deep red color in its raw state, due to the high concentration of myoglobin, especially in muscles that get more exercise. The texture is generally coarse with visible grain, and it often has a layer of white fat known as marbling within the muscle. Cuts like ribeye, sirloin, brisket, and chuck roast are commonly associated with beef. When cooked, beef has a bold, hearty flavor and a firmer texture compared to most other meats, particularly when it is grilled or roasted. The fat in beef tends to melt at a higher temperature, providing a juicy consistency and a savory aroma. In terms of nutritional profile, beef is rich in iron, zinc, and B12, which contribute to its darker color and dense nutrient value. Moving on to pork, which is meat derived from pigs, it is usually lighter in color than beef, appearing pinkish when raw and turning a pale white or light brown when cooked. Pork has a finer grain and softer texture than beef, and its fat content is often more evenly distributed, with a creamier consistency. Common cuts include pork loin, chops, ribs, and shoulder. Pork has a subtly sweet and mild flavor that is easily influenced by seasonings and marinades. Compared to beef, pork is generally more tender and moist when properly cooked, although overcooking can quickly dry it out. Nutritionally, pork is high in thiamine and riboflavin and contains a slightly higher fat-to-protein ratio, especially in fattier cuts like bacon and belly. The meat from sheep is categorized into lamb and mutton, depending on the age of the animal. Lamb, from younger sheep, under 1 year old, has a light red color with a fine-grained texture and white, firm fat. It is tender and mildly flavored, often with a slightly gamey taste that becomes more pronounced with age. Common lamb cuts include leg, rack, shoulder, and loin. Mutton, which comes from older sheep, has a darker red hue, coarser texture, and yellower fat due to increased carotenoid content in the feed. It also has a much stronger, more intense flavor and aroma, making it less popular in Western cuisines but prized in South Asian and Middle Eastern cooking. Lamb and mutton are rich in B vitamins, iron, and healthy fats, but mutton tends to be tougher and benefits from slow cooking methods like braising. Goat meat, or chevon, is another red meat that is leaner than beef and lamb, with a firm texture and less marbling. In raw form, goat meat is darker than lamb and lighter than beef, often with a slightly purple tint. It has a distinctive, somewhat earthy and gamey flavor that varies depending on the animal's age and diet. Young goat meat, called kid, is milder and more tender, while older goat meat requires longer cooking times to break down connective tissue. Goat is extremely popular in African, Caribbean, Indian, and Middle Eastern cuisines. Nutritionally, goat is high in protein and iron but lower in fat and cholesterol than most red meats, making it a healthy choice for many. Bison meat, often compared to beef, is darker red due to its lower fat content and higher iron levels. It has a rich, slightly sweet flavor and is very lean, requiring careful cooking to avoid dryness. The texture is similar to beef but a bit finer grained. Bison cuts like steaks, roasts, and ground meat are used in similar ways to beef, though they cook faster. Venison, the meat of deer, has a deep reddish-brown color and a firm, fine-grained texture. It is lean with minimal fat and has a pronounced gamey flavor that reflects the animal's wild diet. Venison is commonly found as steaks, roasts, sausages, and jerky. Like goat, venison benefits from marination and slow cooking techniques. Horse meat, though controversial in some cultures, is consumed in parts of Europe, Asia, and South America. It is slightly sweet, tender, and dark in color, with low fat and high iron content. Horse meat resembles beef in many ways but has a finer grain and a distinct taste that some compare to venison with a hint of sweetness. In raw form, meat identification can also rely on structural anatomy such as the size and shape of bones attached to the meat, the thickness of the fat cap, and the density of the muscle fibers. For instance, beef bones are typically larger and denser than those from pork or lamb, with more connective tissue surrounding the joint areas. Pork ribs are shorter and curved, whereas beef ribs are longer and straighter. Lamb bones are more delicate, often with a rounded knob at the joint that is easily recognizable. In processed or ground form, meat identification becomes more difficult, but certain indicators remain. Ground beef is darker and denser than ground pork, which is lighter pink and softer. Lamb and goat ground meats are typically leaner and drier looking, with a more intense smell. Taste and smell are critical tools in meat identification. Beef has a strong umami flavor with slight metallic notes due to its high iron content. Pork is subtly sweet with a fatty richness. Lamb has a slightly grassy, herbal aroma from the lanolin in sheep fat. Goat is earthier and stronger, while venison has a wild, woody scent. Texture upon cooking can also reveal clues. Beef retains firmness, pork becomes tender and juicy, lamb stays soft and flavorful, and goat tends to tighten unless slow-cooked. Beyond physical and sensory traits, regional culinary traditions can aid identification. For example, a rack of ribs served with barbecue sauce is more likely pork or beef in the U.S., while spicy goat curry suggests South Asian or Caribbean origins. Cooking methods like roasting whole lamb or grilling beef steaks are culturally tied to specific meats. Nutritional analysis further helps differentiate meats through laboratory testing of protein, fat, iron, and vitamin content. Additionally, DNA testing is an advanced method used in food safety and fraud prevention to confirm the species origin of meat products, especially in processed foods where visual identification is impossible. Meat color changes over time due to oxidation and storage conditions, which can affect identification. Fresh beef turns brown when exposed to air, while pork may become grayish. Lamb retains its red color longer, while goat darkens more quickly. The fat composition is another clue. Beef fat is firm and white, pork fat is softer and creamy, lamb fat is waxy and white, goat fat is hard and sparse, and venison has very little visible fat. Cooking reactions, such as browning, shrinkage, and moisture release, also vary. Beef browns deeply and shrinks moderately, pork retains more moisture, lamb gives off a distinct aroma, goat becomes chewy if overcooked, and venison must be seared quickly to retain tenderness. Cultural taboos and preferences often influence familiarity with certain meats. In Western cultures, beef and pork are common and easily recognizable, while lamb and goat might be more challenging for those unfamiliar with their nuances. In contrast, goat is the most consumed red meat globally, particularly in developing regions. Therefore, geographic and cultural context can provide important clues when identifying meat types. The presence of skin, hair follicles, or unique cuts can also help. For instance, pork skin has visible pores and is used to make cracklings, while lamb fat often has a distinct smell and color. Tools like meat thermometers and pH testers can also indicate meat type based on how quickly it cooks or its acidity. Aging methods affect identification too. Dry-aged beef has a dark crust and nutty aroma, while fresh pork lacks these features. The presence of bone marrow or organ meat can offer additional identifiers. Beef marrow is robust and large, lamb kidney is smaller and oval, and goat liver has a denser texture than pork liver. Lastly, the market labeling, certification marks, like USDA or halal/kosher stamps, and packaging information often indicate the type and source of the meat, though these are not intrinsic features. Ultimately, combining visual inspection, tactile evaluation, smell, taste, and contextual clues allows for accurate identification of meats from various livestock sources, an essential skill for butchers, chefs, food scientists, and discerning consumers who value authenticity, nutrition, and culinary precision. Now that you've learned how to identify different types of livestock meats, you can confidently distinguish beef, pork, lamb, goat, and more just by observing their color, texture, fat, and flavor. Whether you're buying from a butcher, cooking at home, or exploring new dishes, these skills will help you make better choices and appreciate the unique qualities of each meat. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more food tips and cooking guides. Drop a comment below if you have questions or want to learn about specific cuts or recipes. Thanks for watching, and happy cooking.